Kim Tae-ho stepped off the transport ship and looked up at the massive space station floating before him. Nexus Prime was bigger than anything he had ever seen. The station stretched for miles in every direction, its metal surface gleaming under the light of 3 different suns. Ships of all sizes moved around it like insects around a bright lamp. Tae-ho adjusted his thick glasses and pulled his worn backpack higher on his shoulder. The other passengers pushed past him, most of them tall aliens with sharp teeth or glowing eyes. He felt very small and very human among them. His old clothes and nervous habits made him look like any other poor student trying to get a good education. The Galactic Defense Academy was the most important military school in known space. Only the best and strongest got accepted. Tae-ho still could not believe his acceptance letter was real. He had applied using fake documents and a false background story. The truth about who he really was would get him killed. Inside the station, Tae-ho followed the signs to the academy section. The halls were full of alien cadets. Some looked like giant lizards with scales that changed color. Others were made of living crystal that sang when they moved. A few could change their shape completely, shifting from one form to another like water. Tae-ho found the registration desk where a bored-looking alien clerk processed his paperwork. The clerk barely looked at him as it stamped his documents and handed him a room assignment. Squadron 7, Level 15, Room 347. His roommate was already there when Tae-ho arrived. John Woo-jin was another human, but he looked much more confident than Tae-ho. Woo-jin was tall and strong with the kind of smile that made people trust him right away. "You must be Kim Tae-ho," Woo-jin said, extending his hand. "I heard we were getting another human in our squadron. Where are you from?" "Small farming planet," Tae-ho lied easily. "You probably never heard of it." "What about you?" "Military family from the outer colonies," Woo-jin replied. "My father served in the Terran fleet. Always wanted to follow in his footsteps." Tae-ho nodded and unpacked his few belongings. He had learned long ago to travel light and keep his stories simple. The fewer details he gave, the less likely someone would catch him in a lie. The next morning, Squadron 7 gathered in the main training hall. Commander Vextar stood at the front of the room. He was a Vorthak, one of the warrior species that had fought humans 20 years ago. Vextar was 8 feet tall with gray skin and 4 arms. His voice sounded like grinding stone when he spoke. "Welcome to Squadron 7, Vextar announced. "You are here because you showed promise in your entrance tests. But promise means nothing without hard work. Half of you will fail before the year ends." Tae-ho looked around at his classmates. There was Zifia, a Helian made of blue crystal who sparkled when she thought hard. Next to her sat Brixnal, a Moran who kept shifting between different alien forms. Most of the others were species Tae-ho had only read about in books. The first test was a basic combat simulation. Each cadet had to fight holographic enemies using standard weapons. Tae-ho watched as his classmates showed off their natural abilities. Zifia moved like lightning, her crystal body reflecting laser beams. Brixnal became a different creature for each enemy, always choosing the perfect form for the fight. When Tae-ho's turn came, he struggled badly. His shots missed their targets. He moved too slowly and got hit by enemy fire multiple times. The other cadets whispered among themselves, wondering how such a weak human had gotten accepted. But then came the strategy test. Commander Vextar showed them a complex battle scenario, with hundreds of ships and multiple objectives. The cadets had 1 hour to plan an attack that would succeed with minimal losses. Most of the class worked in teams, combining their different skills. Zifia calculated precise firing solutions while others planned troop movements. But Tae-ho worked alone, staring at the holographic display with intense concentration. After 30 minutes, Tae-ho raised his hand. "I have a solution," he said quietly. Commander Vextar looked surprised. "Already? Show us." Tae-ho walked to the front and began moving the holographic pieces. His plan was unlike anything the others had considered. Instead of a direct attack, he used small groups to trick the enemy into bad positions. Then he hit them from 3 directions at once while they were confused and spread out. The computer ran the simulation. Tae-ho's plan worked perfectly, achieving all objectives with only 2% casualties. The room fell silent. "Interesting approach," Commander Vextar said, his 4 eyes studying Tae-ho carefully. "Where did you learn to think like that?" "Just makes sense to me," Tae-ho replied, pushing his glasses up his nose nervously. But Zifia was watching him with her crystal eyes glowing brighter. She had seen something in his strategy that reminded her of famous battles from the history books. Over the next few weeks, the pattern continued. Taeho failed at most physical tests but solved every tactical problem with ease. He could see solutions that escaped even the smartest aliens in his class. When Commander Vextar gave them historical battles to study, Taeho always found better strategies than the famous generals had used. Late at night, Woojin noticed that Taeho received strange messages on his old datapad. The messages were heavily encrypted, and Taeho always deleted them after reading. When Woojin asked about them, Taeho just said they were letters from home. The real test came during the third week. Two alien species, the Corvan Empire and the Daleth Republic, were arguing about mining rights to an asteroid field. Their representatives had come to the academy to train together, but they kept fighting instead of learning. The situation got worse each day. The Corvans were proud warriors who settled disputes with combat. The Daleth were logical traders who believed everything could be negotiated. Neither side understood the other, and their arguments were turning violent. Commander Vextar was ready to send both groups home when Taeho quietly approached him with a suggestion. What if they held a different kind of competition? Instead of fighting each other, both sides could compete to solve the same problem. The winner would get first choice of mining zones, but both groups would share the profits. Taeho designed a complex simulation that required both warrior skills and trading knowledge. The Corvans had to negotiate while the Daleth had to fight, forcing each side to understand the other's strengths. By the end of the exercise, both groups were working together and laughing about their earlier arguments. Captain Yul Neth, the Academy's intelligence officer, watched the whole thing from the observation deck. She was a spider-like alien with too many eyes and a reputation for knowing everyone's secrets. After Taeho's diplomatic success, she began asking questions about the quiet human student who seemed to understand alien psychology better than most aliens did. Taeho pretended not to notice the extra attention, but he knew his time was running out. Someone would eventually figure out who he really was, and when that happened, the careful life he had built would come crashing down around him. 20 years earlier, the galaxy was at war. The Vorthak Empire had been expanding for centuries, conquering world after world with their massive fleets and superior technology. When they reached human space, everyone expected humanity to fall quickly like all the others. But humanity had Kim Dae-sung. General Kim Dae-sung was not the biggest or strongest human, but his mind worked differently than anyone else. While other commanders fought the Vorthaks with traditional tactics, Dae-sung studied his enemies like a scientist. He learned how they thought, how they made decisions, and most importantly, how they made mistakes. The war turned at the Battle of Helios Gate. Dae-sung took a small human fleet against the largest Vorthak armada ever assembled. He should have been destroyed in minutes. Instead, he used the enemy's own strength against them, turning their massive fleet into a confused mess that destroyed itself. After that victory, the aliens started calling him the Iron Fist of Terra, not because he was cruel, but because his strategies hit exactly where they hurt most. The Vorthaks, who had never lost a war, began to fear this human general who seemed to see the future. The war ended when Dae-sung captured the Vorthak Emperor himself in a daring raid that no one thought was possible. But instead of demanding surrender, Dae-sung offered peace. He returned the Emperor and proposed a treaty that gave both sides what they needed. The galaxy was shocked by his mercy. Then Dae-sung disappeared. One day he was the most famous human alive, and the next day he was gone. Some said he had been assassinated. Others believed he had gone into hiding. The truth was known only to a few trusted allies. In the present, Taeho walked through the quiet corridors of Nexus Prime late at night. He had received another encrypted message, and this one was urgent. The meeting place was an old maintenance section that most people avoided. Dr. Park Min-seo was waiting for him in the shadows. She was an older woman with kind eyes and gray hair, but Taeho knew she was one of the most dangerous people in the galaxy. Min-seo had been his father's chief scientist and closest friend. She was also one of the few people who knew Taeho was still alive. "You're taking too many risks," Min-seo said without greeting. "That diplomatic solution you arranged. It's exactly the kind of thing your father would have done. People are starting to notice." "I couldn't just watch them fight," Taeho replied, "and I was careful to make it look like luck." "Luck?" Min-seo laughed bitterly. "You solved a problem that had been building for months in one afternoon. There's no hiding that kind of talent. She handed him a secure datapad with new information. Several alien factions were actively searching for any trace of Kim Dae-sung's legacy. They all wanted the same thing, his secret weapons. During the war, Dae-sung had created technologies that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Weapons that adapted to enemy tactics, ships that learned from each battle, defense systems that became stronger when attacked. The hegemony is getting closer, Min-seo warned. They have agents everywhere looking for connections to your father. And there are others. The Void Collective has been quiet for too long. When they move, it won't be subtle. Tae-ho studied the intelligence reports. The Void Collective was ancient, older than most of the current galactic civilizations. They had ruled vast territories for thousands of years before retreating to the dark regions between stars. Some believed they were extinct. Others whispered that they were just waiting for the right moment to reclaim their empire. What about the weapons? Tae-ho asked. Are they really as dangerous as everyone thinks? Min-seo's expression grew serious. Your father never intended them to be weapons of conquest. He designed them as equalizers, tools to help smaller civilizations defend themselves against larger empires. But in the wrong hands, they could indeed conquer the galaxy. Back at the academy, Tae-ho tried to maintain his cover as an average student. But his classmates were not stupid. Sci-Fi, the crystal being, had been analyzing his tactical solutions with her advanced processing abilities. The patterns she found troubled her. His strategies are too familiar, she confided to Brixnall during a private study session. I've been comparing them to historical battles, and there are similarities to the Iron Fist campaigns. Brixnall shifted into his thinking form, a tall figure with multiple heads that could process information from different angles. You think he's connected to the old general somehow? That's impossible. Kim Dae-sung had no family. That's what the official records say, Zifia agreed. But what if the records are wrong? Their conversation was overheard by Lee Soo-jin, who had been posing as a freelance journalist covering academy life. Soo-jin was actually an agent of the hegemony, the secret organization that worked to maintain galactic balance. She had been investigating Tae-ho for weeks, trying to understand why a mediocre student had been accepted into the academy's most elite program. Soo-jin had her own theories about Tae-ho's identity, but she needed proof. The hegemony had been protecting humanity from complete destruction ever since Dae-sung's disappearance. Too many powerful aliens wanted revenge for their defeats in the war. If Dae-sung had a son, that boy would be a target for every enemy humanity had ever made. The breakthrough came during a routine war game exercise. Commander Vextar presented the class with a scenario that had stumped military strategists for decades. It was called the Omega Protocol, a theoretical battle where a small force had to defeat an enemy that was superior in every measurable way. The scenario was actually based on a real battle from the Human Vorthak War, but the Academy had removed all identifying details. As far as the students knew, it was just another training exercise. Tae-ho stared at the holographic display for several minutes, then began moving pieces with growing confidence. His solution was elegant and devastating, using psychological warfare and precise timing to turn the enemy's advantages into weaknesses. Commander Vextar watched in stunned silence as Tae-ho recreated almost exactly the strategy that Kim Dae-sung had used at the Battle of Titan's Rest. It was impossible. The real battle plans were classified at the highest levels. No civilian, especially not a farm boy from the outer colonies, should have known those details. After class, Vextar called Captain Yulnith to his office. The spider-like intelligence officer listened to his report with growing interest. Run a full background check, she ordered. Deep scan everything. Bank records, travel logs, genetic markers if you can get them, and do it quietly. If this boy is who I think he might be, we're dealing with something much bigger than a gifted student. That night, Tae-ho lay awake in his dorm room staring at the ceiling. Woo-jin was snoring softly in the next bed, unaware of the storm building around his roommate. Tae-ho's secure datapad had received 3 more messages since his meeting with Min-seo. Someone was definitely getting closer to the truth. He thought about his father, the man he had never really known. Dae-sung had disappeared when Tae-ho was only 2 years old, leaving behind only stories and legends. Growing up in hiding, Tae-ho had learned about his heritage from Min-seo and other trusted allies. They had taught him everything: strategy, languages, alien psychology, combat skills. But they had also taught him to hide, to seem ordinary, to never draw attention. Now that careful training was falling apart. His natural abilities were too strong to completely suppress, and the galaxy was full of people smart enough to recognize what they were seeing. Tomorrow, Taeho knew, everything would change. The quiet life he had built at the academy was ending, and something much more dangerous was about to begin. The attack came at dawn, when most of the academy was still sleeping. Taeho woke to the sound of explosions and emergency alarms. Through his dorm window, he could see dark ships surrounding Nexus Prime, their weapons firing into the station's defenses. "What's happening?" Wu Jin asked, jumping out of bed and grabbing his uniform. Before Taeho could answer, their door exploded inward. 3 figures in black armor rushed into the room, carrying strange weapons that hummed with energy. Taeho recognized the design immediately. Kravok mercenaries, some of the most dangerous killers in the galaxy. "Kim Taeho," one of them said through a voice modifier, "you will come with us. Resist and your friend dies." Taeho raised his hand slowly, his mind racing. The Kravoks were expensive. Someone had paid a fortune to capture him alive. But they had made one mistake. They assumed he was just a frightened student. "I'll come quietly," Taeho said, stepping forward. "Just don't hurt him." The lead Kravok lowered his weapon slightly, which was exactly what Taeho had been waiting for. Moving faster than anyone expected, Taeho grabbed a metal chair and threw it at the nearest mercenary. While that one stumbled backward, Taeho rolled under the second Kravok's aim and swept his legs out from under him. The third mercenary tried to shoot, but Taeho was already behind him, using a combat technique that Dr. Minseo had taught him years ago. In seconds, all 3 Kravoks were unconscious on the floor. Wu Jin stared at his roommate in shock. "How did you do that? You failed every combat test we ever took." "No time to explain," Taeho said, grabbing weapons from the fallen mercenaries. "We need to get out of here." But as they ran into the hallway, it became clear that the attack was much bigger than just a kidnapping attempt. The entire station was under assault. Ships calling themselves the Dark Star Syndicate had surrounded Nexus Prime with a massive fleet. Their demand was simple: surrender Kim Taeho or watch the academy burn. Commander Vextar's voice echoed through the emergency speakers. "All cadets to defensive positions. This is not a drill. Prepare for boarding action." In the main corridor, Taeho found chaos. Students and instructors were running in all directions, trying to reach their assigned positions. Some aliens were panicking, while others were preparing to fight. But their defensive plans were clearly not working. The enemy was already inside the station. Zifia appeared beside them, her crystal body flashing with stress patterns. "The command center is cut off," she reported. "Enemy forces control the main access routes. We're trapped in this section." Brixenol shifted into a combat form, growing armor plates and weapon arms. How did they know exactly where to hit us? This wasn't a random attack. Taeho watched the tactical situation develop, his father's training taking over. The Dark Star Syndicate had planned this perfectly. They had studied the station's defenses and found every weakness. But they had also made assumptions about how the defenders would respond. "Everyone listen to me," Taeho said, his voice cutting through the noise. "The enemy expects us to panic and run. Instead, we're going to coordinate a counterattack." "You're just a student," one of the alien cadets protested. "What do you know about real combat?" Taeho turned to face the group, and something in his eyes made them all stop talking. For the first time since arriving at the academy, he wasn't trying to hide who he was. "I know that the enemy has 15 assault teams moving through the station," he said calmly. "I know they're using standard boarding doctrine, which means they'll try to control the power core and the communication center. And I know that if we hit their command ship at exactly the right moment, their entire operation will collapse." He began giving orders with the authority of someone born to command. Squad leaders found themselves obeying without question. Even Commander Vextar, when he arrived with a group of instructors, listened to Taeho's battle plan with growing amazement. "This is brilliant," Vextar admitted, "but it requires perfect timing and coordination." "Are you certain it will work?" "It will work," Taeho said. "Trust me." The counterattack began with small teams hitting the enemy from unexpected directions. While the Dark Star forces were focused on their main objectives, Taeho's plan struck at their communication relays and supply lines. Soon the attackers found themselves fighting a battle they hadn't prepared for. In the middle of the fight, more ships appeared around Nexus Prime. But these were human vessels, led by a massive battlecruiser that Taeho recognized immediately. The Terran fleet had arrived. Admiral Park Hyunwoo's voice filled the communication channels. "This is Admiral Park of the Terran Navy. Any hostile forces engaging Nexus Prime will be destroyed. You have 1 minute to withdraw." The Dark Star Syndicate tried to escape, but Taeho had anticipated that too. His defensive strategy had positioned Academy ships to block their retreat routes. Caught between the Academy defenses and the Terran fleet, the attackers were quickly defeated. After the battle, Admiral Park came aboard the station personally. He was an older man with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too many wars. When he looked at Taeho, there was recognition and sadness. "You look just like him," Park said quietly. "Your father would be proud of how you handled this situation." The secret was out. Every cadet, instructor, and officer on Nexus Prime now knew that the quiet human student was actually Kim Taeho, son of the legendary Iron Fist of Terra. News of his identity spread through the galaxy within hours. Captain Yulneth approached with a detailed report. "We interrogated the captured syndicate members," she said. "They were hired by someone calling himself the Shadow Broker. The payment was enough to buy a small fleet." "Any idea who this Shadow Broker might be?" Admiral Park asked. Before Yulneth could answer, Colonel Cho Namgil stepped forward. He was an older Korean man with scars on his face and the bearing of a professional soldier. Taeho had never seen him before, but something about him seemed familiar. "The Shadow Broker is a cover identity," Namgil said. "I served under General Kim Dae-sung during the war. I was there when he disappeared." He wasn't hiding from admirers or treasure hunters. He was hiding from the Void Collective. The room fell silent. The Void Collective was more legend than fact to most people. But Namgil's expression was deadly serious. "Your father discovered something during the war," Namgil continued, addressing Taeho directly. "The Void Collective had been manipulating galactic conflicts for centuries, playing different species against each other to keep them weak. When Dae-sung ended the human Vorthak war with peace instead of conquest, he disrupted their plans." "So they killed him?" Taeho asked. "They tried to," Namgil replied. "But your father was too smart for them. He faked his own death and went into deep hiding, taking with him the location of weapons that could threaten even the Void Collective. Now they know his son has emerged, and they'll stop at nothing to capture you." Lee Soo-jin stepped out of the crowd, dropping her journalist disguise completely. "The hegemony has been protecting humanity from this threat for 20 years, she said. "We can offer you safety, but only if you cooperate with us." Taeho looked around at all the faces watching him. His classmates, his instructors, the fleet officers, the mysterious agents, they all wanted something from him. Some wanted to protect him, others wanted to use him, and still others probably wanted him dead. For 20 years he had lived in hiding, pretending to be ordinary, but the attack on Nexus Prime had changed everything. His cover was blown, his location was known, and enemies were closing in from all sides. The boy who had arrived at the academy with a worn backpack and nervous habits was gone forever. In his place stood Kim Taeho, heir to the Iron Fist of Terra, and the galaxy would never be the same. "I'm done hiding," he announced to the assembled crowd. "If they want to see me as my father's successor, then that's exactly what I'll become. But I'll do it my way, not theirs." Admiral Park smiled grimly. "What do you need from us?" Taeho straightened his shoulders and pushed his glasses up one last time. "Everything." 3 months after the attack on Nexus Prime, Taeho stood on the bridge of the Starship Phoenix watching his growing fleet move through hyperspace. What had started with just Admiral Park's battlecruiser had grown into a force of over 200 ships from dozens of different worlds. The news of his identity had spread like wildfire through the galaxy. Some species remembered Kim Dae-sung with respect and gratitude. Others saw an opportunity to gain favor with the son of a legend. But there were also those who viewed Taeho as a threat that needed to be eliminated before he became too powerful. "Incoming. Transmission from the Hegemony Council," announced Captain Han Jae-wook from the communications station. Han was one of his father's old soldiers, a steady man with graying hair who had joined Taeho's fleet without hesitation. "They're demanding another meeting." "Tell them I'm busy," Taeho replied, studying the tactical displays. "We have more important things to worry about." Dr. Park Min-seo approached with a data pad full of disturbing intelligence reports. "The Void Collective is moving faster than we expected," she said quietly. They've destroyed 3 human colonies in the past week. Each attack was surgical, precise, designed to send a message. Tejo nodded grimly. The enemy was trying to force him into making mistakes by threatening innocent people. It was an old tactic, but effective. Every destroyed colony made him angrier and more desperate to strike back. "What about the search for Father's hidden base?" he asked. "John Woojin thinks he found something," Minseo replied. "He's been analyzing your father's old star charts and found some interesting patterns." Woojin had become Tejo's chief tactical officer, one of the few people who knew him well enough to offer honest advice. When Tejo had left the academy, Woojin had followed without question, leaving behind his own bright future to serve his friend. "The patterns are subtle," Woojin explained when they met in the secure briefing room. "Your father visited dozens of systems during the war, but there's one he kept returning to even after the fighting moved elsewhere. A dead system called Erebus, 7 jumps from the old battle lines." "What's there?" Tejo asked. "Officially? Nothing. Just a burned-out star and some lifeless rocks. But the navigation logs show your father made at least 12 trips to that system. Always alone, always in small ships that wouldn't attract attention." Li Sujin, who had remained with the fleet as the hegemony's official representative, leaned forward with interest. "The hegemony has no records of any collective activity in that area," she added. "It would be the perfect place to hide something important." But their planning was interrupted by urgent news from the outer colonies. General Bae Dong-hyun of the Human Supremacy Movement had declared himself the rightful heir to Kim Dae-sung's legacy. Bae commanded a significant force of human ships and had begun attacking alien settlements, claiming he was finishing what the Iron Fist started. "This is a disaster," Admiral Park said during the emergency council meeting. "Bae is making humanity look like the aggressor. Every alien species that trusted your father is starting to question whether they were wrong about human intentions." Tejo studied the reports of Bae's attacks with growing anger. The general was using his father's reputation to justify crimes that Dae-sung would never have approved. Worse, Bae's actions were playing directly into the Void Collective's hands by turning potential allies against humanity. "We need to stop him," Tejo decided. "But first, we need those weapons. Without them, we can't protect anyone from what's coming." The journey to Erebus took 2 weeks through dangerous space. The Void Collective had been active in the region, and several merchant ships had disappeared without trace. Tejo's fleet had to move carefully, using stealth technology and following routes that avoided the main shipping lanes. Erebus 7 was exactly what Woojin had described, a dead world orbiting a cold star. The planet's surface was covered with ancient craters and twisted metal, the remains of some long-forgotten civilization. But Tejo's sensors detected something interesting beneath the ruins. "There's a structure down there," reported the ship's science officer. "It's buried under 2 miles of rock and debris, but it's definitely artificial. And it's big." The excavation took 3 days using military mining equipment. When they finally broke through to the hidden facility, Tejo felt his breath catch in his throat. His father had built an entire underground complex, complete with manufacturing facilities, research labs, and storage areas filled with technology that was 20 years ahead of anything else in the galaxy. In the central chamber, they found Kim Dae-sung's personal records, holographic messages addressed to his son, explaining the truth about the Void Collective and the real reason for his disappearance. "They're not just conquerors," Dae-sung's image explained. "They're gardeners. For thousands of years, they've been cultivating galactic civilization like a farmer tends crops. They allow species to grow and develop until they become too strong. Then they arrange wars and disasters to cut them back down. The cycle has repeated dozens of times. The recordings revealed the location of weapons caches hidden throughout human space. But more importantly, they contained the complete strategic doctrine that Dae-sung had developed for fighting an enemy, like the Void Collective. It's not about having better weapons," Dr. Minseo realized as she studied the files. "It's about having weapons that can adapt and evolve. Your father created ships that learn from each battle, becoming stronger and smarter over time. The centerpiece of Dae-sung's arsenal was Project Prometheus, a small fleet of experimental ships that could literally redesign themselves during combat. Each ship contained advanced artificial intelligence that analyzed enemy tactics and developed countermeasures in real time. But activating the Prometheus fleet would send a signal throughout the galaxy that humanity had access to weapons of unprecedented power. Every species, friend or enemy, would want to either control or destroy them. The decision was made for Tejo when emergency messages arrived from the outer colonies. The Void Collective had emerged from hiding with a massive armada, destroying everything in their path. Admiral Park's regular fleet was no match for ships that had been perfected over millennia, and General Bay had made things worse by attacking the Collective's advanced scouts, giving them the excuse they needed to begin open warfare against humanity. New Sol Colony is under attack, Captain Han reported. They're requesting immediate assistance. Tejo looked at the tactical display showing the approaching enemy fleet. Over 1,000 ships, each one larger and more powerful than anything humanity had ever built. This was what his father had feared. The full might of an ancient empire that had decided humanity was too dangerous to allow to survive. Activate Project Prometheus, he ordered. The hidden ships launched from their concealed bases throughout the Erebus system. They were smaller than traditional battleships, but they moved with an unnatural grace that suggested intelligence behind their actions. As they joined Tejo's fleet, their hulls began to shimmer and change, adapting to the specific threats they would face. The battle above New Sol Colony was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Void Collective's ships were powerful and sophisticated, but they had been designed using strategies that were thousands of years old. The Prometheus ships learned from each exchange of fire, developing new weapons and defenses that the enemy couldn't predict. At first, the Collective's admiral tried to overwhelm the human ships with superior firepower, but as the battle continued, the Prometheus fleet began to anticipate every move, countering each tactic moments after it was deployed. Soon the ancient ships found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to know their thoughts. The turning point came when one of the Prometheus ships deliberately allowed itself to be captured by a Void Collective boarding party. While the aliens were studying their prize, the ship infected their entire fleet with a computer virus that turned their own weapons against them. Within hours, the mighty Collective armada was in ruins. Those ships that hadn't been destroyed were fleeing back toward the Galactic rim, their crews too shocked to mount any organized resistance. The galaxy watched in amazement as news of the victory spread. Humanity, which had been considered a minor power just months before, had defeated an enemy that had terrorized civilizations for millennia. But Tejo knew this was only the beginning. The Void Collective had many more fleets, and they would return with new strategies designed specifically to counter the Prometheus technology. The real war was just starting. Standing on his bridge as rescue ships moved to help the survivors of New Sol Colony, Tejo felt the weight of his new responsibility. He was no longer just Kim Dae-sung's son or a student pretending to be ordinary. He had become exactly what the galaxy feared, a human warlord with the power to reshape the balance of power among the stars. The question now was what he would do with that power. The victory above New Sol Colony sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Within days, dozens of alien species were sending representatives to meet with Tejo, some offering alliance and others demanding explanations. The young man who had arrived at the academy as a nervous student was now one of the most powerful individuals in known space. But power brought new problems. General Bae Dong-hyun had watched the battle from his own fleet, and the sight of the Prometheus ships had convinced him that humanity's destiny was to rule the galaxy. He began gathering support among human supremacist groups, preaching that Tejo was too weak to use his father's weapons properly. The aliens fear us now, Bae declared in broadcasts sent throughout human space. They know we have the power to crush any resistance. But instead of claiming our rightful place as masters, young Kim wants to negotiate with them as equals. This is not what the Iron Fist would have wanted. Tejo watched these broadcasts from his flagship, feeling the weight of expectations pressing down on him. Half the galaxy wanted him to become a conqueror, while the other half feared he already was one. Finding a middle path seemed impossible. We need to address this quickly, Admiral Park advised during their daily strategy meeting. Bae is gathering more ships every day. Soon he'll have enough force to challenge us directly. Lee Soo-jin agreed, though for different reasons. The Hegemony Council is getting nervous about your growing power, she admitted. Some members think we should have eliminated you when we had the chance. Others want to use you against the Void Collective. Either way, they're planning something. Dr. Minseo had spent weeks studying the captured Void Collective technology, and her findings were disturbing. "Their ships are more advanced than we realized," she reported. "The fleet we defeated was just a scouting force. Intelligence suggests they have thousands more ships hidden in the dark regions beyond the galactic rim. But the most immediate threat came from an unexpected source. The Vorthak Empire, humanity's former enemy, had declared that Teho's weapons were too dangerous to be controlled by any single species. They were assembling a coalition of military powers to contain the human threat before it spreads. "Ironic," Commander Vextar observed during a secure communication from Nexus Prime. 20 years ago, my people tried to conquer humanity and failed. Now they want to destroy you because you might do the same to them." Teho made his decision during a private meeting with his closest advisors. "We're going to do something no one expects," he announced. "We're going to offer peace to our enemies." "Which enemies?" Wu Jin asked. "We have quite a few at this point." "All of them," Teho replied. "The Void Collective, the Vorthak Coalition, even General Bay. I'm going to propose a new kind of galactic government, one where humanity serves as protector rather than ruler." Ambassador Og-Wan, his newly appointed diplomatic advisor, looked skeptical. "That's a beautiful ideal, but why would anyone trust us? After what they saw at New Sol, every species thinks we're planning to conquer them." "Because," Teho said, "we're going to prove that strength can be used for protection instead of domination." The first test of this philosophy came when the Void Collective sent a massive fleet to attack the industrial world of Kepler Station. This time, they brought ships equipped with countermeasures designed specifically to neutralize the Prometheus technology. The battle was much harder than the first encounter. Teho watched from his command center as his adaptive ships struggled against enemies that had learned from their previous defeat. The Void Collective had studied the captured battle data and developed new weapons that could disrupt the learning algorithms that made the Prometheus fleet so effective. "We're losing ships," Captain Han reported grimly. "The enemy is anticipating our adaptations faster than we can implement them." But Teho had learned something important from his father's records. True victory didn't come from having the best weapons. It came from understanding your enemy better than they understood themselves, and the Void Collective had a weakness they didn't even know about. "Open a communication channel to the enemy flagship," he ordered. "Sir?" Han looked confused. "In the middle of a battle? Trust me." When the channel opened, Teho found himself face to face with Overlord Nethys, the ancient being who had ruled the Void Collective for over 3,000 years. Nethys appeared as a tall figure shrouded in dark energy, with eyes that glowed like dying stars. "So," Nethys said in a voice like grinding stone, "the young warlord wishes to surrender before his fleet is completely destroyed. How practical." "Actually," Teho replied calmly, "I want to offer you a choice. Join the new Galactic Confederation I'm building or face complete extinction." Nethys laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You think your little toys can threaten an empire that has lasted since before your species learned to make fire?" "I think," Teho said, "that your empire is dying from old age and you know it." The statement hit home. Through careful analysis of captured collective technology, Dr. Minseo had discovered that their ancient civilization was slowly collapsing. Their ships were powerful, but increasingly difficult to maintain. Their population was declining as fewer young beings were born to replace the old. They were playing a desperate game, trying to harvest resources from younger civilizations to preserve their fading glory. "You've been gardening the galaxy for thousands of years," Teho continued, "but you never learned to plant new seeds. All you know how to do is cut down what others have grown. That's why you're afraid of humanity. We represent something you can never be again." During this conversation, the battle continued around them. But Teho had achieved his real objective. While Overlord Nethys was focused on their debate, the Prometheus ships had been analyzing the collective's new countermeasures and developing solutions. Suddenly, the tide of battle turned as human ships began adapting faster than their enemies could respond. Within an hour, the collective fleet was in full retreat, but instead of pursuing them, Teho ordered his ships to stop firing and offered medical assistance to the damaged enemy vessels. "Why?" Overlord Nethys demanded over the still open channel. "Why spare us when you could finish what you started?" "Because," Teho replied, "I want you to live long enough to see what the galaxy looks like when it's governed by cooperation, instead of fear. News of the battle and Tejo's mercy spread quickly throughout known space. Species that had been preparing for war began to reconsider their positions. Maybe this human warlord was different from the conquerors they had known before. But Tejo's greatest challenge was still ahead. General Bei had finally gathered enough support to make his move, declaring himself the true heir to Kim Dae-sung's legacy and demanding that all human forces follow his leadership instead of Tejo's. The confrontation came at the neutral station of Liberty Point, where Bei challenged Tejo to single combat according to ancient military tradition. The winner would command all human forces in the coming conflicts. "You're soft," Bei declared as they faced each other in the combat arena. "Your father would be ashamed to see you showing mercy to humanity's enemies." "My father," Tejo replied, "taught me that true strength comes from knowing when not to use your power." The fight was brief but decisive. Bei was older and more experienced, but Tejo had been trained by the best teachers his father's network could provide. More importantly, he fought with the confidence of someone who knew he was right. When Bei lay defeated on the arena floor, Tejo offered him his hand. "Join me," he said. "Help me build something better than an empire built on conquest." Bei stared at him for a long moment, then accepted the offered hand. "You really are your father's son," he admitted. "But can this dream of yours actually work?" "We'll find out together," Tejo replied. 6 months later, representatives from over 200 species gathered at Nexus Prime for the signing of the Terran Accord. The new galactic government was unlike anything that had existed before. A confederation where humanity served as protector and mediator rather than ruler. The ceremony was held in the same hall where Tejo had once struggled through his first combat simulation. Now he stood before delegates from across the galaxy, no longer wearing thick glasses or pretending to be ordinary. He had become exactly what the galaxy needed, a leader strong enough to keep the peace but wise enough not to abuse that strength. "Today," he announced to the assembled crowd, "we begin a new chapter in galactic history, not as conquerors and conquered, but as partners working toward a common future." Among the crowd, Tejo could see familiar faces. Commander Vextar represented the Vorthak Empire, which had decided to join the Accord rather than fight it. Zifia and Brixnell had become ambassadors for their respective species. Even Overlord Nethys was there, representing what remained of the Void Collective. The signing ceremony was interrupted by a commotion at the back of the hall. A group of young beings, humans, aliens, and hybrids, had arrived late, still wearing the uniforms of the expanded Galactic Defense Academy. "Sorry we're late," called out their leader, a young human woman who looked remarkably like Tejo had at that age. "But we didn't want to miss seeing history being made." Tejo smiled as he watched the new generation of cadets take their places in the audience.